Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Voice Coffee Break with me, James Poulter, CEO and co-founder at Vixen Labs. And on this episode of Voice Coffee Break, we are going to be talking all about voice strategy. What is that? Good question. What is voice strategy? Let's get into it. I get asked this question a lot. What do we actually mean by voice strategy? It's something that we specialize in here at Vixen, as well as also apps and ecosystem stuff within the smart speaker and smart assistant world that I'm sure you're familiar with for devices like that. We also spent a lot of time working with clients on their voice strategy, which involves way more than just the actual act of building an app or some kind of system. Well, voice is way more than just a single device. It is a whole ecosystem that we have to think about. You might be familiar with a smart speaker, perhaps you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Assistant device at home or a Google Nest. Maybe it's got a screen or maybe it doesn't. But whatever it is, you're used to the idea of a smart speaker. And for most people, these devices of smart speakers, they're the way into getting into voice. Most people start there. But in reality, many of us have been using smart devices like our phones for a lot longer and been speaking to our smart assistants for many years. Siri's been around for nearly a decade. And so most of us have at some point or other spoken to a smart device on our phone and carried it around with us. And with the addition of smart headphones, things like AirPods, Google Pixel Buds, maybe Samsung Galaxy Buds, or whichever your headphone of choice is, others are available, you might be used to using smart assistants in different places, both in the home and out of the home. And as more and more of us buy new cars that have new head units in them that either support Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you might begin to find that you speak to your devices in your car as much as you speak to them anywhere else. We actually think that voice is the new interface for consuming the internet. That's the new interface for consuming the internet everywhere. Not the only interface, it's important to say. We're not saying that screens are going anywhere. In fact, they're going to be more present in our lives than ever before. But voice as the way of controlling those screens, well, that is on the move. We've seen that during the past 6 to 8 weeks, voice traffic has nearly doubled across all different types of devices. People using their smartphones more for voice when they're out and about because they might be wearing masks. They don't want to touch the screens. They've got gloves on. They might be in the home using their smart speaker to talk to something. And out and about where there might be smart interfaces that support voice, it's even more prevalent and more of an opportunity to use it as we don't want to touch these different interfaces. Then what does it mean for your voice strategy? Where do you start? Well, when it comes to voice strategy, for us, there are 3 components, 3 core building blocks of what it means to do a voice strategy. And the first, once you've acknowledged that this is the new interface, is to get into the sexy world of metadata. That's right. Metadata. I sometimes call this the backstage of your voice strategy, the stuff that you don't often see, but if it wasn't there, you're not going to get very far. So what do I mean by metadata? Well, every time that you make a query to one of these smart devices, whether that's Alexa, Google, Siri, Bixby, or Cortana, they all rely upon metadata to make the basic queries that we ask them work all the time. From what track you want to play from a song, to what the data is around the weather, and even within certain third-party applications like Google Assistant, we can use metadata as a surface content on the Google Assistant platform or on Alexa by making sure that it's well optimized. This is the backstage, it's the stuff that makes your overall strategy work. So when it comes to working with metadata, there's a few different places to start. But the first is to make sure that the content that you have on your websites are well optimized. Google's sniffers and crawlers that go and find the knowledge graph data that sits in this Google search box, they exist for voice as well. And so you can begin to do some very simple things to get started with this. First of all is go check out the Google Actions frameworks. You can find out more information over on the Google Actions developer website portal, where you can look at things like FAQs, podcasts, how-to and step-by-step guides. By adding these things to your website, you're more likely to get that content surfaced over the top of the built-in device content, whether that's coming from a different device like Google, or if it's coming from another platform, say like Wikipedia or Audible or places like that. There are lots of opportunities to get your content surfaced if you are optimizing your metadata. So start there. What content are you surfacing? What content do you own? Whether that is a document, whether that is some data that perhaps is sitting on a website, maybe it's content that's sitting in a content store, perhaps if you're a music provider or if you've got video to be provided. How's that out there? And what about your YouTube content? Is it well optimized for the queries and questions that people might be asking? If you don't yet know what people might be asking for your website, we'll do another video about that very soon around Google voice search in particular. But the first thing to be looking at is Google Trends. Go and see what questions people are asking, those who, what, where, when, why questions, and see whether or not your data is currently optimized for those queries on your website. Okay, so first up is metadata. That's the backstage. Now let's go to the on stage, what the apps and content is that you are building for voice devices. And apps and content take many different flavors, whether that is utilities, whether that is narrative content like stories or games, or it might be actual content that you're putting out into the world. Perhaps it might be podcasts or other audio content like a flash briefing for Alexa. All of these different platforms provide us with different places to put content. So apps and content are obviously a fundamental part of your voice strategy. They're the thing that sit on top of that metadata, because once a query has been asked and a result has been surfaced, we need rich content to be able to answer that. And that might come in the form of an Alexa skill. It might be a Google Assistant action or a Samsung Bixby capsule if you're in the US where that's available at the time of recording. Or it might be content that you can serve up in different ways. It might be video content for a smart display, or of course audio content like a podcast, long form audio or music, and it could also of course be a flash briefing. So there's lots of different ways into this, but apps and content are the layer above the metadata, and they have to be working well in sync with one another to make sure that this is working. So voice strategy, the first two components, metadata, and then we're talking about our apps and content. So remember, there's a third part to this on top of your apps and content, which is the on-stage. Then you've got the front of house, and that is invocation marketing. What do I mean by front of house? Well, it's like your guy that's out in the street or the big banner that's over the front of the theatre, letting people know what is available inside. You would never walk in to see a stage show if you walked up and down the Strand or Shaftesbury Avenue here in central London or Broadway in New York and walk into a show without seeing the big banner over the front letting you know what the name is and maybe some pictures and some information about what the show is about. To know whether or not this is for you. And it goes exactly the same with our voice experiences. Invocation marketing is the act of marketing what you want people to say to their smart device, whether that is a smart speaker, whether that's their smartphone, or anywhere else that is voice enabled. Because voice works in a slightly different way to other types of search, you need to know what it is that we're going to say to a device to make it work. And so invocation marketing is the act of saying, hey, get insert device name here to do this, or hey, insert device name there to do that. We have to market these phrases as we would do any other platform, whether that was your social media following or your website in days gone by. You would put replies onto different marketing collateral. You might let people know what the URL is of your website, or say search for this in your posters or your TV advertising or wherever it might be. We need to do the same thing when it comes to voice. So invocation marketing is the third and final part of the stack and is often the thing that is most neglected, but we need our front of house to be working as hard for us as the other two building blocks. So we start with metadata, making sure that we know what people are asking and how well optimized it is. We develop apps and content that work really well to answer those queries and meet people in the need that they have. And third of all, we have invocation marketing to promote what is out there. We need that third layer to be able to get this all together. And voice strategy, what is it? Well, hopefully now you know. Voice strategy is not too complicated. It can be easily navigated with these three simple building blocks. I hope that you enjoyed this video and this episode of Voice Coffee Break with me, James Poulter. If you want to get more into voice strategy, perhaps start building it yourself, why don't you head over to the new Vixen website at vixenlabs.co, and we'd be super happy to help you get started in the world of voice strategy. Don't be afraid, now is the time to start, because 2020 is the year that voice becomes one of the primary interfaces for the internet. And if you've got customers on the internet, now's the time to start thinking about it. All right, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, would you please drop a like wherever it is you're watching it, share it with your networks, leave a comment if you can so that we know what else you might want in the future, and perhaps add this to an email that you're sending out to your team so that they can get involved with this as well and begin to start their journey of learning what it means to build a voice strategy in 2020. See you again very soon on Voice Coffee Breaks with me, James Poulter.